And we are recording on Monday, May 10th. Not Monday, good Lord, Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 at 4:16 p.m. Eastern Time with Miss Sally Saxon, and we are going to discuss the book that I guess you did in collaboration with Dr. Thorpe, and I'm not even going to butcher the other name, but if you could please introduce yourself, Miss Saxon, and then we can jump into the book.
Sure. My name is Sally Saxon, and I'm a retired attorney. Um, and my most recent endeavor has been in writing a book called COVID-19 Vaccines and Beyond, What the Medical Industrial Complex is Not Telling Us. And my two collaborating authors are Dr. Jim Thorpe, who's been on the show before. Many of your audience have probably heard him maybe on multiple interviews on different platforms. He's an OBGYN physician and maternal fetal specialist. And then Dr. Deborah Viglione is who introduced me to Jim Thorpe, is board certified in internal medicine. So she focuses on functional and integrative medicine. She has a clinical practice. And so, I never really intended to set out to write what this became.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had started doing an updated and expanded version of a previous book I'd written a few years ago called Globalists on Trial, The Hidden Agenda to Destroy America from Within.
Yes.
And I was going to include a couple chapters on COVID. So I'd already done some research about the vaccines and all. And then, as I heard more interviews with some of the people, especially healthcare professionals at the beginning after the vaccine rollout, and I heard their stories.
Sorry, I have my windows open. If you hear a siren, that's why. Sorry. Keep going.
Okay. So I started hearing all these stories, heartbreaking stories of people who had been vaccine injured. And the initial several ones I heard were among healthcare personnel, who felt they should set the example and do the right thing and get the shot. But unfortunately, they got one of the bad batches and had serious injuries. So just looking at the struggles that they went through with not only dealing with the physical, injuries that they had, but, that caused them to leave their job. And the irony is that in many cases, they got the shot only because they were required to by their employer in order to keep their job. But then because of the physical injuries they sustained from the shot, they had to leave their employment anyway. And so that's extra sad, in my book. And so their household income went down while their medical expenses significantly increased. In many cases, the doctors weren't even recognizing that their physical problems now had any connection to the vaccine. And they're afraid to write them up, even if they did acknowledge them, because, with the electronic medical records, and you put down that, somebody, suffered vaccine injury, it can get, the healthcare provider in trouble. So that's a sad thing. So a lot of these injured people were not getting any help from their doctors. And in some cases, the doctors just didn't know what the problem was. And they would just say, well, we think it's all in your head. Well, what an insult.
Yeah.
It's all in your head. And I heard this was a common thread through many of the testimonies that I heard. And so you've got that issue. Then you've got their insurance companies who wouldn't cover a lot of their extra medical expenses. And so now you've got the household income down, the medical expenses up. And, their employer's not helping them. The government's not helping them. The drug companies certainly aren't helping them. Nobody's helping them. So it's just very heartbreaking. So initially, I started out writing, gathering together my data in an effort to, have something to present to healthcare professionals to encourage them to stop the shots. but then it expanded as I did more research and added more to this report. And I eventually got to the point where I realized that, hey, I need to get some professional medical critique of what I'd written and what I'd
Mm.
put together. And so that's when I was introduced to Dr. Deborah Viglione, because she was very active in Florida, in Northwest Florida, for the health freedom movement in this area. We all live in Northwest Florida. And so she immediately introduced me to Jim Thorpe and had him take a look at the manuscript, and they both decided they wanted to help in this effort. And it was never my idea to put their names on the book, because
Yeah.
I thought I never would have asked. I
Yeah.
never would have thought to ask, because I knew that doctors were really taking risks at even speaking out
Yeah.
about this, much less putting their name on a book. But they felt so strongly, and they're speaking out anyway. And they thought, they wanted to do that. So it's like, okay, which is amazing in itself. And so both of these uh, collaborating authors of mine, I'm so proud of them, and for the way they are very outspoken, with the truth about the dangers posed by the shots. And so I've been very blessed. And then once we got the manuscript done, they started circulating it among some of their friends, and like Dr. McCullough
Dr.
and so
Peter
forth.
McCullough.
And so next thing I know, we're getting endorsements from, Peter McCullough, Dr. Brian Artis, Dr. Richard Bartlett, Dr. Richard Urso. We got one from Steve Kirsch, attorney Jeff Childers, a lot of those folks that I certainly didn't know. It was
Yeah.
all, because of them. And so, that and the comments that they made about the value of the book, like really surprised me, because, I thought it was pretty good, but
Yeah.
yeah, to hear the comments that they made about it was very, very gratifying. So I thought, wow, I think we have more here than I thought,
Yeah.
we did. So basically what it is, Tommy, is it's a compilation and overview of the evidence of a lot of the key issues surrounding the vaccines.
Okay.
And it's in 4 parts. The first part deals with why these aren't really vaccines, and why vaccine isn't necessary in the first place. Although I present that as a question, was a
Okay.
vaccine really necessary in the first place? And besides the fact that natural immunity is better than uh, vaccine immunity, there's some other reasons, too, based on data, again, from the CDC, from Pfizer, using their own data, um, why a vaccine wasn't even necessary. And if we have time, maybe we can identify a couple of those.
Sure.
But then the second part, deals with some of the harm that's been caused by the shots. And, like the impact on pregnancy and breastfeeding women, whom I'm sure Jim Thorpe has talked
Uh-huh.
to you about, and also the military. The impact on the military has been devastating. And in fact, on my website at sallysaxon.com, I have some additional documents, like from military whistleblowers, that people may be very interested in reading, because that chapter in the book about what the military whistleblowers have to say, and they're one of the attorneys who has been representing them, Todd Callender, it's just some pretty devastating things. Like I'm sure you're aware, and probably many of your listeners, how when the shots rolled out and you had the military mandates, all of a sudden the incidence of many different diseases and conditions just
Mm-hmm.
skyrocketed. And and so we've got the impact on the military. How about the impact on people 65 and older? The impact on athletes and children. So many organizations all around the world, even were giving very strong warnings. Even Dr. Robert Malone gave very strong warnings, against giving these to children. And yet here we are, and even Eric Rubin, who was, I think he was the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, but he also sat on the advisory board, the FDA advisory board for the tests, for the clinical trials of the tests for I think it was 5 to 11-year-olds. And, when they determined that, yes, it was safe and effective, to give these shots to that age group. And yet he said, well, we won't really know, how safe it is until we actually, give these shots.
Which is absurd.
Aren't you supposed to figure that out before?
It's the height of absurdity.
Yeah. And so there's, and then another part of chapter 2 deals with some of the documentation and information about the poor manufacturing processes, that went into making these vaccines. And even at that point,
no quality control.
Yeah, there was a lot of evidence that, it was just really bad, and a lot of inconsistency. And just so there's a lot disclosed about that, and it really causes you to think twice about, wow, what is in these things. And
you might like to speak to, I've had her on here a couple times, once with Dr. Malone, Dr. Aditi Bhargava, the head of mRNA research at UCSF Medical School, which, if anyone doesn't know, UCSF is like Harvard's, like the West Coast, Harvard of the West Coast, excuse me. Yeah. And we've actually done a couple episodes specifically on that, with PowerPoints and everything, about the uneven distribution of I think the lipid nanoparticles in the mRNA delivery. And it came down to just total lack of quality control. Quality control that you would normally use for something as generic as penicillin or aspirin was not used for something that, it would be weird if you didn't use it for something as simple as that.
Yeah.
They weren't using it for this breakthrough bleeding edge technology.
Right. And the information about the inconsistencies was known.
I'm adding your website to the description right now. I want you to, whenever I get on my phone, I always want to inform the guest. I'm like, I'm not texting. I'm doing something for the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. But the fact that there was a gross inconsistency between batches was known even before the emergency use authorization was given. And there was a leak of documents from the European agency that's the kind of counterpart to the FDA. And they noted that as a major objection. Just a few weeks before, it was actually rubber stamped as, okay, we're good to go. And Michael Yeadon, I don't know if you've ever.
I've tried to get him on here so many times. I cannot for the life of me.
Yeah.
There are a couple of elusive unicorn podcast guests that I just can't. I don't know. Sorry for a bit of a side tangent. It's one thing if I'm trying to get the president, and obviously it's difficult to get them. But there are some guests that I've had on everyone around them, and for some reason it might just be the answer my ego doesn't want to hear. Maybe you checked out the podcast and it's like,
yeah,
I don't like this guy.
Yeah, come to think of it, I haven't really seen him on many interviews recently either.
Can't find him.
Mainly with attorney Reiner Fulmich and those kinds of programs. But for those who don't know, Dr. Michael Yeadon was a former vice president of Pfizer and their chief scientific officer of one of their divisions or departments.
I think the allergies and histamines division or something.
Yeah, and so he has a lot of the inside scoop. He's been in the industry for many, many years. And so I include a lot of his statements from different sources that I compiled, and they're pretty damning, actually. And part of it, and part of what he was saying, like concerning the manufacturing process, was that, okay, if you got even one major objection, from the regulatory agency, as you were trying to get, approval for your new drug, that was a major thing. He said, heads would roll.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the European agency that was reviewing all the, documents and things that had been submitted for them uh, to in the process of getting the emergency use authorization from them, it came out that there were, like, I think 7 major objections, not even
Wow.
just one. And yet 3 weeks later, which Dr. Michael Yeadon said, there's no way in the world that anybody could have corrected and resolved all of those major objections in 3 weeks. So it's just kind of like rubber stamp, doesn't matter, just full speed ahead.
And
Yeah.
you gotta wonder, I'm always trying to look into the psychology behind it. And obviously it's a spectrum. The answer is not black and white. It's not as innocent as, well, we were all scared of a pandemic, and it's also not as diabolically and centrally controlled as a bunch of guys in rooms smoking cigars, going, and now we're gonna do this. It's somewhere in between. And I don't know enough about it, but I always think about the 1986 Challenger explosion, and
Mhm.
they call it go fever. And I think that's the definition. And it's when the entire apparatus of something is just moving forward. And go fever is distinct from, I would say, maybe like entrance into Vietnam, or maybe the kind of rushing through of the Patriot Act after 9/11, or the kind of bum rushing of we're going to invade Iraq now, because there's a lot of money to be gained in those,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of power. So those I don't think we can classify as go fever. NASA seems a little innocuous, but the point is, it's either money and power, or it's just this sort of group think. Don't slow down the armada. All the it's 10 aircraft carriers. We're going to take on Okinawa. It doesn't matter if one person falls off. Like, it's this go 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 fever,
Yeah.
and I think it's a mixture of both of those for this. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine. And actually, I'll talk about this more in a few moments. But actually, based on the probably more than 1,500 hours or so of research that I've done just on the vaccines, not including thousands of hours on other kind of related subjects, I would say that it's worse than that.
Okay.
But in any event, so that's part 2 of the book. Part 3
Okay.
deals with, have the are the vaccines effective? Have they been effective? And there we get into a discussion of, like, the risk benefit analysis, and all that doctors are saying, like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny and others say, there is no benefit. It's all risk,
Yeah.
because, and we've seen even admissions now coming from some of the regulatory agencies and Pfizer, itself, that, okay, well, it doesn't prevent infection. It doesn't prevent disease. It doesn't prevent transmission. They admit they never tested whether it prevents transmission. And then their fallback position, well, even though it doesn't prevent all those things, uh, it still lessens the severity of, the symptoms, and helps to prevent hospitalization, disease. Well, according to Dr. Ryan Cole and others, there's absolutely no evidence to support that claim. It's just a claim, which is like so many other claims that have been made by, the Fauci and the drug companies and CDC, FDA. Lots of claims, but where's the evidence? And even when there is evidence, so often it's manipulated or just outright misrepresented, or, something. And, from the standpoint of a lawyer, it's like there's so many points of fraud.
Mm.
Anyway, so the risk benefit analysis, and we include, some different analyses that have been done by different people, and they say it's just not even close. The risks outweigh the benefits. So, uh, so what's the point in getting these? And even in the, uh, well, Steve Kirsch, I don't know if he pointed
I've
this
had
out on the
Yeah.
program recently, but the Oh, the Cleveland Clinic study,
Mm-hmm.
where they did a study of their 51,000 employees to see what the effect of the vaccine was on its employees. So if you got one shot, two shots, three, four shots, uh, and he points out that actually the charts representing the data they came up with was just the opposite of probably what they had hoped or intended, because it showed that for each shot that you got, each COVID shot you got, you were more likely, to get, you know, COVID, and that's the second part of the effectiveness, issue that we go into in the book. Is it's called negative efficacy, meaning it does more. It's not only just ineffective, it's worse than that, because it leaves you worse off than if you hadn't had it.
It's not a saline injection.
Yeah, so that's a major issue. And then we get to part four, which in some ways is my favorite part of the book, although I shouldn't call it favorite, but what I think is one of the most important parts of the book. I'll put it that way, because that deals with the big picture in
Yes.
which all things COVID fit into,
Yes.
and also what is in the shots,
Mm.
based on the research by many independent researchers all over the world, and who examined, the vials under various kinds of microscopic examination, and vials from different
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers, different countries, but they had very similar types of results. Um, Around the world. And so the big picture is really important to know, because it affects everything. If people don't understand the big picture that all things COVID fit into, and then they can be easily deceived. And so
Mm-hmm.
what we have here, is that there is, a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call them wealthy elites. I
Yep.
call them globalists.
Yep.
Some people call them cabal, other
Mm-hmm.
kinds of names. It is not conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy in fact. And
Mm-hmm.
and in the book, you may be familiar with this quote, Tommy, by David Rockefeller, who wrote in his memoirs that he said, people kind of accuse me and my family of being part of a secret
Yeah.
cabal working
Guilty.
against the best interests of the United States. Conspiring to establish a like a one world
Mm-hmm.
political economic structure.
I stand guilty as charged.
Yes, I plead guilty as charged, he says. And
Yeah.
so, in the law, we call that an admission against interest. When somebody makes an admission like that, that other people would think is detrimental to that person's reputation or something, then it has a high credibility value.
Hmm.
In other words, he's probably telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you
And
don't say something about yourself unless it's true.
yeah. And what I said earlier, it's not a couple guys in a room smoking cigars. I I I do believe it is a top-down cabal, but I always try to, for my own, I guess, the value of keeping a limber mind, I always try to throw out all possible ideas. It's maybe it is just chaotic, um, emergent phenomena, and there's no one behind it, or maybe it's truly a top-down group of Illuminati. So when I said that earlier, I didn't mean to disparage it. I try to throw out everything and keep an open mind. Because if I don't keep an open mind and I just decide what the answer is before I even hear the facts, well, then it's an opinion and that means nothing. That all
Right,
being said, yeah, it's too obvious, and the benefits are too unique and numerous for it to just be a fluke. It seems
right,
very
right.
much so. I mean, with military precision and planning, an intended operation.
Yeah, exactly. And so I want to commend you on the way you approach these things and with the open mind, because,
You
that's
have to.
you have to. And I encourage people, when it comes to any major controversial issue,
Yeah.
you're deciding, well,
Who's
whose
making
report do I
money? Who's
believe?
getting power? Who's consolidating control? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, well, the legacy media, the controlled corporate media are saying this, but then we've got these doctors like Dr. McCullough, Dr. Thorpe, Dr. Viglione,
Yeah.
so all the Brian artists saying, no, we've got a problem here. These are very dangerous. So how do you know whose report to believe? And so looking at it, from a lawyer standpoint, I encourage people to look at controversial issues from the standpoint of a jury, as though you were the defendant.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you want your jury to consider the evidence, in
Yes.
the trial? Whether it's criminal or civil, it doesn't matter. Do you want the jury only to hear and consider the prosecutor or the plaintiff's attorney's case? Which is what I call like the court of public opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the legacy media versus independent media, like yourself. Um, and but a lot of people, they're still too much tuned in to CNN, MSNBC, and some of those. Or for others, it gets into the big lie, like that Hitler told. The
Mm-hmm.
bigger lies
The bigger the
are
better.
easier for people to believe than the smaller lies, because it normal for normal people, we just can't imagine that people that we have entrusted, with our health and to make other decisions that impact our lives in major ways. It's difficult for us to believe that they could do anything intentionally to harm us. People that we should be able to trust, like the government, the drug companies, and others. So it's very difficult for a lot of people to think that they could possibly be lying. And of course, the healthcare providers, I think, from their medical education, were brought up, trained, because controlled by the Rockefellers and, these same people, the globalist elites, controlling medical education and the training. So they're taught, and ingrained with, trusting the CDC and the FDA. And, this is the way that you treat this and that. But, in this case, what I encourage people to do, and there are a lot of questions throughout the book, when I present certain kinds of evidence or statements that the CDC made, or Fauci or somebody, it's like, why? Why
Yeah.
would they do that? Or why would they change this definition? Or why would they do something that kind of doesn't make sense? Like changing the definition of what it even means to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
When they're, well, if you're trying to if you're trying to create the perception that there's a pandemic of the unvaccinated,
Uh-huh.
then you need to get as many people in that unvaccinated category as you can, who are being hospitalized and dying, from COVID. So if you change the definition of who is vaccinated to include, or if you're going to
Exclude.
change the definition of who's unvaccinated to include people who actually did get one or more shots, but they died or were hospitalized within 14 days, and then you call them unvaccinated,
Mm-hmm.
they had 1, 2, 3, who knows how many shots. It's like that skews all the data. But those are the kinds of things they did. And in fact, one thing that kind of really struck me was, it's not only, or on virtually every point where the globalists and the people at the top, who were promoting this campaign, on virtually every point that they could have lied, just made something up, suppressed, censored, manipulated data, misrepresented data, they did. I mean, even if I'd been playing devil's advocate, which I don't like to do,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be on that side.
Yeah.
But even if I were doing that, I don't think I could ever have come up with as many ways to deceive people as they did.
Yeah.
So many things to lie about and claims, unfounded claims to make. It's really quite astounding.
So what is the 100,000 foot view? What is the reasoning behind it? Is it, and I'll go first and say, at first I thought it was a money grab. I don't think it's a money grab anymore because they've mastered the money grab over the last century and a half. And it's you just start a war. He's
Yeah,
right. You go blow up a school and then start a war. They've mastered it. They got it down pat. It's tried and true. This seems like it's so much effort and there's so much propaganda and they're so fanatic about people getting the shots
yeah,
that it doesn't seem like if you wanted to just make money, you do an '08 financial crisis, you'd do a bunch of toxic loans, or you'd go start a war. This is it seems like there's another reason behind it. And I don't know if it's from the extreme of like the Malthusian hypothesis of they want to decrease fertility, or if it's just they want to kind of enact, it has nothing to do with the vaccines and it's all about shifting the Overton window to the government can force you to take injections and the government can force you to wear digital or have digital IDs and the government now has reason to shut down misinformation and then from there you could do mission creep and go misinformation also applies to the Hunter Biden laptop or inflation stats or Ukraine involvement and there seems to be a lot of different levels of what the reasoning could be but I don't think it's just money. What are your thoughts?
for sure. It goes beyond greed. It goes beyond corruption. It goes beyond just wanting to control and micromanage people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the bigger agenda that the globalists have. And that's part of the big picture is what is their bigger agenda that they're leading up to? And how does COVID, all things COVID, including the vaccines, fit into that agenda? And this is addressed in part 4 of the book. And this was by far the most difficult thing I ever had to write
Yeah.
because in fact, I struggled a lot with, what to include, what not to include. But, people need to know the truth about what's really going on because it's not enough just to know what the agenda is. And I'll speak to more about what the agenda actually is based on the information that we know. Um, it's not just they need to know what the agenda is, but also I think it's very important for them to understand the ways and methods, the strategies and tactics that the globalists use
Mm.
to deceive people, to get them to go along, with the agenda. Because, when there's a crisis situation, people don't make decisions or do the same things or act the way they would if it weren't a crisis. So that's like one of their favorite
Yeah.
strategies is if they don't have a natural crisis,
Make one.
that arises that suits their goals, then they create their own crisis, or at least the perception of a crisis, which is what we have here. Yeah, and that's expressed, shown in the book through all the different kinds of manipulation. And it goes back to, was a vaccine ever necessary in the first place? Like,
Mm.
no, based on the CDC's and Pfizer's own data, like, no, it wasn't. And so why, I go to your question that you just raised, why are they so hell-bent then on getting, people injected, every person on the planet? And so, the bigger agenda, goes beyond, the greed, goes beyond the, desire to control, because at its root, this is a spiritual war.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you've got, it's about good versus evil, and it's a very anti-God,
Yeah.
agenda.
When you boil it all down, it comes down to literal demons from hell and people who just love life and want to be free and go forth and prosper.
Yeah, and so we've got this war, and it's those who want to play God, the
Mm-hmm.
globalists, and then God, connecting with God, having a personal relationship with God, and the agenda, with the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab,
Yuval Noah
Noah
Harari.
Harari, and some of the incredible statements that he makes that, oh my gosh, that
Wild,
does
yeah.
he really believe those things? But they're talking about, genetic editing, gene editing, changing what it means to be human, integrating technology and artificial intelligence with the human body so that I don't know, you may be too young to know about the $6 million man and the Bionic Woman TV series.
Vaguely remember.
Yeah,
I know of them.
yeah. Well, okay, so that was kind of predictive programming, I think.
Hmm.
They were making it look really cool that, hey, you're part machine, part human. You can do all these incredible things that normal humans can't do, and so they make it look very attractive, and that's part of the deception. And they package. They're masters at deception and packaging what's really an evil thing in ways that make it look good and attractive and beneficial so that people will go along. So that's why I say if you don't know their strategies and tactics and ways and methods, you can easily be deceived. Okay, so their agenda, and it goes beyond just what's called transhumanism,
Hmm.
where you're maybe hybrid, part human, part machine, artificial. But even now the thing is synthetic life
Okay.
forms. That's where you no longer even need a man and a woman to
Yeah.
procreate a new human being. Uh, they're trying to. I think the ultimate goal, because
Completely break away.
God created male and female in his image, told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So take everything that's just the opposite of that. And if you have a synthetic, a being that's totally synthetic and no longer any part human, and you've just got these AI robots, or I don't know exactly how they intend this to work. Uh, you are getting so far away from the original design of creation, and that's
Mm.
why everybody really has to make an intentional choice as to what side of the war are they going to be on. Do you want to align with people who are carrying out what it can only be called an evil agenda and changing what it means to be human? And that's why you end up with, in the shots, one of the big impacts is infertility,
Hmm.
both on the male and female side. uh, and uh, and then the huge impact increase in stillbirths and miscarriage. I'm sure Jim Thorpe's talked
Hmm.
about with you, and uh, and then all the people who are dying suddenly. Even teenagers
Hmm.
sitting at their desk in school now, all of a sudden, they die of a heart attack. Um, and they've been putting these shots in the young kids. Fortunately, I think not as many young kids have gotten the shots as they had hoped, but they keep pushing now. They're adding it to the childhood schedule, and so there's a real threat to the
Hmm.
existence of the human species if the globalists are able to fully carry out their agenda. But while the globalists have their great reset that they're frantically working toward and desperate, God has his great reset. Many call it the Great Awakening.
Hmm.
I think it's both an awakening, not just people listening to shows like yours, Tommy, where they're learning the truth and what's really going on from the guests that you have that are sharing about their particular field. So it's not just the truth about what's really going on, but it's also an awakening spiritually, where people are being awakened to see, like, gosh, how am I going to cope with these horrendous things that are going on all around? And, the economy's got huge problems. Our physical health, we're threatened because now it's not just people who got the shots that are, vulnerable or kind of in trouble or, suffering, but it's everybody because they're taking the mRNA and the nanotechnology and, through different ways of getting it, of aerosolizing it,
Mm-hmm.
the air, even putting things in the water, in the foods, in all the different products we use, skin creams, shampoos, you name it, everything. It's like they're leaving no stone unturned.
Mm.
And so what I also included in here, starting right at the beginning, kind of at the beginning of chapter 2, is about a word of caution, uh, but also a word of encouragement. The word of caution is that there's many things in here that people may find difficult to accept. Uh, but there's over 600 footnotes in there, so it's highly cited, which is one of the things I think Peter McCullough noted in his, well, and several of the other endorsers noted, that it's highly cited and referenced. It's not just a bunch of opinion, what I think about things. Uh, but so the word of caution is that a lot of these truths may be difficult to accept.
Yeah.
And, especially for maybe people who've gotten the shots or people who are administering the shots or
Mm.
recommending the shots. But the point I make is that no matter, well, that there are solutions that more and more people are discovering now, different kinds of products and treatments that can help the vaccine injured, for example, and those still struggling with long COVID, symptoms. There are some natural solutions, but even to the extent that man's best efforts are not able to bring a person to full recovery
Mm.
physically, uh, nothing is impossible for God. And I could tell you a whole bunch of different testimonies of miracles, outright miracles or healings that God has done. We're not just talking thousands of years ago. We're talking now, today, in recent years. I mean, He's a miracle working God, and nothing is impossible, no matter what the problem is, even whether it's physical, emotional, because there's a lot of emotional uh, impacts as well with the fear, and some people are still very fearful. Well,
Mm.
we don't have to live in fear. When you know God and you're connected to God, and you see how He works, and His benefits, it's like, wow,
Mm.
he's the source. He's what we need. And he's given us many promises, and he's faithful to those promises. So uh, there is always hope with God to overcome all the emotional impacts, the trauma, depression, the hopelessness, worthlessness, just so many, negative emotional impacts, as well as the financial impacts. So many people have been just financially devastated over these last few years, as you know, and it's like, how do we recover? And then what about the damage that's been done to the land in
Mm.
terms of pollution or the lack of nutrients in the soil, and just poisons in the land itself. Well, God's able to do those too, and there's take care of that, and there's precedent for that. And in fact, the Bible, speaks very specifically to that, and provides God's prescription for healing the land,
Mm.
too. So I want to leave people with hope
Yeah.
that no matter how bad the bad things about COVID and the shots, are, the good is better than the bad is bad.
Mm.
Good news is better than the bad news is bad. And but for what's coming, I mean, we don't even know how bad or much worse things may get than they are already.
Yeah.
But we need to be prepared. And I think one of the first lines of defense is having that personal connection, relationship with God, because who else has, I mean, He's the creator. He's got the ultimate power. His power is greater. And we know in the end, He wins. But in the meantime, between where we're at right now and that ultimate victory, I don't know about you, but I can't handle it by myself.
No.
I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Ride's gonna get a little bumpy. Um, I do like I'd love to have you back on to talk about that deviation to transhumanism and then fully synthetic life. And if you really boil it down, it seems like at the core of it all is if God gives free will, that free will implies freedom, freedom to make mistakes, freedom to learn, versus this idea of total control, top-down control, control of censorship, control of your thoughts with brain implants, and then control of life itself through synthetic biology.
Yeah,
Seems to be the total opposite. That evil always it always appears that it has a root desire to project control, to have dominion over you. It doesn't want you to make your own decisions versus
yeah,
love is very much so you don't need to tie down your partner. Your partner loves you and they want to be your dog is always going to come back to you. You're always going to come back to your dog. There's no chains between you. And that's what true, right? True loving is you're free to go do what you want to do and go make your mistakes versus evil is always grip. It wants a hard grip on your soul,
yeah,
on your heart, on your body. And at
yeah,
the very core, that seems to be it is
yeah,
free will versus driven automatons.
yeah. And also, one thing that we learn from the scriptures is that the devil masquerades as an angel of light.
Oh yeah, no.
You can only counterfeit the real thing.
He's a
But the
tricky bastard.
yeah, the counterfeit is packaged very nicely.
Very well.
It looks very, very nice, very pleasurable, very beneficial on the outside.
It's a fishing
When you
lure.
get deep into it, it's like, uh-oh, the ultimate effect is just the opposite. And so, the devil as a created being uh can only counterfeit what God and then deceive people into thinking that it's the better thing and the better way to go. But yeah, so I guess I would just want to leave people with the fact that it's really extremely important to be informed
Mhm.
and to know what the globalist agenda is, but also to know what their ways and methods and strategies and tactics are, which I go into more in the other book that I'm hoping to finish later this year about the globalists on trial. But there's a lot of these things in this book as well, which is, by the way, available on Amazon.
I have the link in the description for everybody listening.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and 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 then also choose what side you're going to be on.
Yeah.
Um, God's side or the side of those who are trying to play God,
Mm.
who like Tommy was just talking about, just the control and lack of freedom and just all the negative things. It's like, who really wants that?
Yeah.
But when we know what God offers, what He's made available to everybody, it's like it becomes irresistible. Like,
Mhm.
wow, if we knew, we'd want what God offers. But here's another point I'll just throw in too. Remember that the people who have lied to us about all things COVID, who've lied to us about all these other crises and things, the Federal Reserve and all these other institutions, all these other things going way back, it's the same people who lied to us about those have, who control the major media, the legacy media, have also lied about God
Mm.
and His
Yeah.
goodness and His love. And where the spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. So if
I,
you're feeling enslaved or controlled, then you can be set free from that and come into the freedom that God makes available to us without fear
mm. Yeah.
and being able to get rid of the trauma and all those things. So um yeah, but also just one last point I'd like to make is
Sure.
um this okay, we're giving away as many books, a lot of books, ourselves, because our mission is to help wake people up who aren't aware of all these things. And so, you know, we've been told like this is a good resource to wake people up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would really encourage your audience to, check out the book, not only to read it for yourself, but we need a little army of people who can help, put a copy into the hands of somebody who really needs it.
Sure.
And you can't force them to read it, but hopefully it'll be make them curious enough to at least take a look at a few pages. And if they look at a page or two or three, they may end up reading a lot more. And because if they don't have it in their hands, they aren't likely to even know about it, much less to buy it. But if somebody that they know, gives them a copy and puts it in their hands, they're much more likely to read it, because I believe our country cannot afford to have a large percentage of our population be unaware
Mm.
of these really important things, because the stakes are extremely high. It's not just a matter of life and death here, but even eternity. And
Mm.
how do we deal with all the stuff that the globalists may throw at us next?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I'd really love to have you back on. I'd love to kind of go down the whole transhumanism and then transcendence as a whole. I think that would be a cool episode to do. Kind of walk those ideas out and play around with those if you're interested, of course.
yeah, sure. Of course. Yeah, I'll have
Absolutely.
to do a little more homework in the meantime.
I'll do some too, and I'll text you after this, and we'll schedule that. But for now, Miss Sally Saxon, we need to wrap this one up. Thank you so much for coming on. You are brilliant, and I genuinely look forward to talking to you again. I really want to get into that synthetic biology thing that sparked a train of thoughts in my mind. But guys, in the description is the book, your website, and please go check out the book. And yeah, ultimately, don't despair. Don't be depressed. Don't take the black pill. Find God's light, I think is probably the takeaway.
Yeah.
Miss Saxon, thank you so much. I will text you right after this.
Okay.
And
Thank you so
can't,
much,
can't
Tommy.
wait to chat again. Thank you.
Yeah.